Project Feline is an anime-style parkour adventure starring Gabi, a feline-human hybrid. Players build momentum by running on walls, grinding on rails, and sliding down hills to traverse complex environments as fast as possible. I'm Raymond, and Project Feline is my first title. I have a small prototype, but the next challenge is to turn this into a full game. To do this, we'll need 4 times the size, all new rendering, lighting, and landscape technology, 16 times the detail. And to get 16 times the detail, I'll need funding to survive production. This is no small task. Most people who attempt this do not succeed, but recently I got lucky. The Australian federal government awarded $4 million in development grants to 31 games around the country. One of these games was my game. We worked really hard to get selected, but once we were in, we quickly realized this grant was not what it seemed. In this devlog, I'll be telling you the story of how I got Project Feline in and out of one of the worst deals I've ever seen. Before we begin, I have some important news. You can now wishlist Project Feline on Steam. Wishlist now to stay notified on any major updates. Our story begins in 2021. I had just been awarded a grant from Epic Games. It allowed me to continue development for a while, but I would need more to see Project Feline to completion. So my goal was to use Epic's funding to reach my next milestone, developing my prototype into a comprehensive vertical slice of what the final game could look like, and then use that V-slice to secure more funding in the future. While I undertook this goal, Project Feline underwent massive changes. At the time Project Feline was awarded its first grant, the mechanics still felt jank, and the environments left much to be desired. My first goal was to remedy these issues for the V-Slice build. I completely reworked Gabi's movement, allowing for real physical momentum, and I was able to bring on my good friend Matthew Palahay to help with level design.
Oh, hey, how's it going, dude?
Going all right. How about yourself?
Good. Just finished day of work. Do you want to chat about look development stuff?
Let's do it.
Sick.
Our first priority was to establish a more distinct visual style and set a quality bar for Project Feline's environments. Anime is a broad style. Before work even began, we had to carefully pick where we wanted to aim on the anime spectrum. Matt is experienced with the PBR pipeline. To play to his strengths, we explored what an anime environment with PBR rendering would look like. We took inspiration from Makoto Shinkai's films, which have some of the most detailed and stunning environments in the genre.
I think we can do this. Like when you look at the assets, this texturing, you could literally take the Quicksilver Megascan texture of like concrete wall. You want to see how far you can get with the post-processing, and then see how much material work is required.
Yeah, exactly.
Because you want to push it to the limit of like, how close can we get?
Within a couple of days, Matt put together a detailed diorama of Project Feline's world. Our objective here wasn't to make a playable area yet, but to experiment with how we could faithfully achieve the anime art style as quickly as possible. To construct this test environment, Matt utilized a technique called kit bashing, whereupon original environments are made from combining different ready-made assets together. With the Mega Grant, I was able to invest in some new anime skyboxes and over a dozen modular kits from the Unreal Marketplace. We also put together a post-processing stack with bloom, oil paint filters, color grading, and more to quickly stylize these assets with few modifications. We'll explore these techniques in more detail later, but graphically, this was a big leap forward for Project Feline. But graphics mean little without the appropriate level design. Throughout development, there's been a lot of tension regarding whether to do linear levels or open-ended environments. Each comes with their own challenges, and for this V-Slice, we wanted to create a map that would reflect the type of gameplay that would be present in the full game. As development continued through January and February, Matt provided valuable insight on tackling this problem.
So imagine this, right? There's a collectible here, so there's a collectible there, right? Now, but imagine when you start, you can't see them. So you run over here, and then Gabi stops the text at the bottom. Like, you know, the face with the text. It's like, oh no, the door's locked. And then like a sequence camera shows the 2 locations, and then you cut back to Gabi, and then you have to run over, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm gonna put a timer for this hypothetical situation.
All right.
3, 2, 1, go. Here we go. All right, so I'll run over.
Go.
Gabi text. Pan, sequence 1, sequence 2. Okay.
Go.
Get the first one. This is without any extra level design. Get the second one. Gate opens. And 20 seconds of gameplay.
Nice.
And then now imagine this.
Level design is my least favorite discipline, as I much prefer working with characters. However, Matt is the exact opposite.
Let's just see how long this takes. You see where I'm going with this? Gabi's gonna run to the door. Ready? And go. Okay,
Go.
Just running to the door. Sequence. Go. Nearly 40 seconds, 38 seconds.
Nice.
We should figure out a bunch of motifs for your game like this.
Yeah. For this V-Slice, it was important to me that there was at least a good 15 minutes of playable content, making the most use out of the smallest possible space. I was concerned the game would be too short with strictly linear environments, so we decided to do a mix of linear and non-linear, with levels comprising of multiple areas. Gabi progresses through these open areas linearly, but each area is sealed off by a gate. To open the gate, she must explore for hidden switches and collectibles. I thought it would be cool for Gabi to visit more areas like this in the game, completing various missions and objectives throughout the level to progress the story. With Matt putting the block out together, I started work on a system which would allow me to create story objectives and side missions for these levels. This was a big undertaking, and while I could have made a simpler system for the V-Slice, I believed that getting a solid system together now would save me time later on. However, it wasn't before long where I started encountering strange issues, like really strange issues. If we load in here to one of like these levels, you touch one of the invisible trigger volumes, the mission will spawn in. This time trial mission I love, because this is the only one that works properly. Because I can start at that checkpoint, it triggers the timer, and it goes through the checkpoint sequence as it should, and I can hit the goal. And this is like the only one that works. When it comes to the more complex missions, like the collectathon one here, you can see that when I activate it, first problem, the goal object is visible. Now that shouldn't happen, it should be invisible at the start and it should only spawn in once you've collected all of the collectibles. I don't know which one, you have to compile them in a certain order, but if I compile the checkpoint sequence, yeah, you see it's different now. You see? I didn't touch anything. You guys just saw. I didn't touch any of the code, I just hit compile, and if I collect all three of these, then it spawns the goal, and now it's working like it's supposed to. But then if I restart the mission, what's this? Why is the goal there? So, you know, it's just like, I don't understand. As the weeks rolled by, I reached a point of diminishing returns where I was making no headway no matter how much time I put in. I know maintaining momentum is a key mechanic in Project Feline, but I found that it applies to the development process too. I knew I would burn out if I kept going, and I could still get things done without this system in place. So, I shelved it. Crisis averted, right? Almost, but I encountered another roadblock in April. Raymond's log 2022, 4th of April. I've contracted COVID, which is fantastic. I don't know what I will be able to get done in the next week. I get a feeling that I've yet to see the worst of it. I'm just angry. I'm just angry with myself. Because this is gonna, like, slow me down. And I hate things that come at the expense of time spent on the project. I'm already starting to feel more tired by the second, so we'll see what happens. Hopefully development can continue. Development did not continue for most of the following week during my recovery. I really wanted to complete the V-Slice by June, an outcome which seemed increasingly less likely as the days passed. But nothing could have prepared me for the next twist to our schedule.
Hold up. Dude, come on. You can't go out looking like that. You look ridiculous. What's that? What am I wearing? I'm wearing the Crate Gang Gabi merch, available for a limited time. We got hoodies, we got hoodies, we got tees, we got mugs, stickers, and more. This hoodie is my favorite because you got this nice, inconspicuous, minimalist design on the front. But on the back, you got Gabi watching your back. And if that's not enough, you can stick one of these bad boys on your laptop or something, and you can have Gabi watching your laptop's back. If you want to support Project Feline, check out the merch on store.projectfeline.com.
Day 6 of self-isolation, I'm finally starting to feel a little better. But an opportunity has come up. There is a grant being run by Screen Australia for games development. Screen Australia is the federal government's key funding body for the screen production industry. They announced this grant, titled the Games Expansion Pack, as an initiative to help emerging Australian studios by providing development grants of up to $150,000. Reading through the details, Project Feline seemed like the perfect game for such an opportunity. But there was only one issue. The deadline is in 3 weeks, and you need to submit a variety of things, including a build of the game and a bunch of paperwork. For the submission, we needed to prepare a build or trailer for the game, a 3-minute video pitch, a development plan, a financing plan, and a 3-page marketing plan. Yeah, I'm a little panicked because this kind of came up very short notice, and I'm still sick.
So I really can't predict how productive I'm gonna be. I don't really know what I'm up for, but we need funding if this game is gonna come out. So I'm gonna document what happens over the next few weeks. I guess we'll let the chaos begin. We're going to submit this for a grant. We're going to have to do something about these grid textures first of all. When I went to apply for Epic, I can assume that they understand what a game in development looks like because Epic are a game developer, but Screen Australia are not a game developer. So I'm trying to work with the worst case scenario here and think about like, what can I do to make this look the most impressive it can? How can I make this shine?
The next 3 weeks were intense. We had to cut a lot of tasks from the backlog and only prioritize things that would directly contribute to leaving a good impression. This meant we had to cut some areas from the V-Slice blockout and instead focus on presentation. For the build, Matt's job was to turn the blockout he had made into a fully meshed 3D environment with models, materials, textures, and lighting. The idea behind this level was to make an abandoned port consisting of primarily industrial assets, but also with a mix of Mother Nature reclaiming the land. With kit bashing, Matt was able to blend original and licensed assets together to achieve this concept, and form new unique structures. For example, he would take groups of shipping crates or groups of wall tiles and then copy those groups around to fill out the environment. It saves a lot of time using these groups instead of meticulously hand placing every single model. To fill the gaps where assets could not, he made use of tileable materials and decals. Using ready-made assets is a great way to expedite production, and Matt was able to put this environment together in his spare time over the 3 weeks we had. I feel there's a lot of misconceptions about using store-bought assets, a practice commonly referred to as asset flipping. Using licensed assets has grounds in legitimate game development, but I think the real issue people often have with this approach is when store-bought assets are used in poor taste and with no art direction. That's why I really appreciate the effort Matt went to in establishing a coherent mood that felt fitting with Project Feline. This was also helped by his use of lighting. For this level, he started with a singular directional light and a skybox, but then moved on to placing these smaller colored lights around the environment to set the mood for different areas. I'll admit, when I first saw the meshing, it was a lot more detailed than I was expecting. I think it's certainly possible for games to go a bit overboard with detail, especially when it comes to choice of colors. However, I think Matt's use of materials and exponential height fog helps to mitigate this problem. The blue tint of the fog washes out and normalizes colors in the distance, leaving the more saturated colors in the foreground, resulting in a more visually coherent player experience. In an earlier devlog, I programmed various obstacles like spinning blades, jump pads, and lasers to make the levels more challenging. Matt made full use of these for the V-Slice map. However, I had been using untextured cubes to represent these objects in-game. My focus for the build was to update these placeholder hazards with new original assets. For the build, I designed models for a collectible, a switch, a grind rail, a spinning fan, a gate, and a turret. Unlike the static environments, these obstacles move quite a bit. So to create these assets, I adopted the 3-tone cel-shaded style. Making 3D models look like hand-drawn sprites is challenging, as it demands the assets be modeled, textured, and animated in a very specific way. To achieve this look, I employed the same techniques used to create Gabi's model.
Raymond's log, Monday, 11th of April. I was working on the collectible. The reason why I did this one first is because the kick switch model that I'm going to make next has a cog in it that I can just use this for. It's also been animated. I have a stylized version of this animation, the anime limited frame style. And to me, I think it really helps these assets look like they're 2D sprites almost.
Working while recovering from COVID was an uphill battle. I started chipping away at these assets in short bursts.
I've just finished work on the kick switch model. It's broken up into 2 parts. We've got the base, and then we've got this lever that will rotate one way or the other depending on where Gabi comes from. We can go up to them and kick them. If we go and activate this other one here, we can see that it will open the gate.
This pace was comfortable, but slow, and I eventually found myself staying up all hours of the night to get these assets ready on time.
It is 4 AM right now. I've got a grind rail model finally, and it's just like this area basically that just repeats. You can see that it doesn't quite tile perfectly, but it's good enough. I also just kind of improvised a jump pad. I UV'd and textured and modeled it all in the last few hours or so. We can go and jump on it. I'm probably gonna sleep in tomorrow morning. It's like 4:30 AM. I just kind of I don't know, I guess I forgot to stop working. So I think I've earned a bit of a sleep in. I lied earlier. I did not go to sleep. I stayed up. I took a quick break just to wind down. I went and watched some Seinfeld. But by the time the episode was done, it was like 5 in the morning. And I figured, should I bother trying to go to sleep or should I just stay awake? So I stayed awake. I finished up the fan asset. I haven't done anything to the surface normals, so that's why you get this like flickering of the blades. I don't know if I'll have time to fix that. I don't think the people assessing the submission are going to care. I've just got a few more left to do. Hopefully I stay awake long enough to complete them all.
It had been 8 days since learning of this grant, and we had 10 days left to submit. I was able to work quicker as I began recovering from COVID.
I have just finished doing the gate model, very happy. So if I go and touch this collectible, you can see that the door will move out of the way. So one model to go, and that model is the turret. I'm about to hop on live stream now and do that. I haven't slept in more than 24 hours, so I feel a bit delirious. So to mitigate that, I'm going to stream because I can't get to, there's no opportunity for me to procrastinate. So I want to put myself on the spot and get this asset done before I go to bed. Turret is done. Turret is done. All models are done. We've got all the materials, all of the shaders and everything on it. UV'd very weirdly, but to get this kind of texturing with these really sharp lines, it's kind of what you need to do. I haven't had time to animate it, unfortunately. I want to spend a bit of time tonight implementing a basic dialogue event. So I'm going to see if I can stream some of that. I don't think it should take too long. Today, we're going to add an extra little bit of flavor because I really want to impress the panel. We will create a blueprint class, make a widget. We're going to create like a little something on the canvas. Now we need some text. There we go. We're going to add a trigger box to it. We'll have it about that big. On component, begin overlap, create widget. There we go. So we'll make a new variable in the event graph portrait. And this will be an image, set image. So I can go here and I can in the variables, tell it what to display. So I can give text like, I can do this, and then we'll get the Gabi portrait. So yeah, check this out, guys. Watch this. So we'll launch the game, and we run in here. And then Gabi, look, she's saying something. Wow, look at her first words. So there we go.
3 weeks ago, the game looked like this, but now it looked like this. In this build, Gabi is on the run. She must pass through the abandoned port and escape to the city. But this area of the port is blocked off by a gate, and with her parkour and momentum, she must explore the abandoned port to find 2 hidden switches to unlock the gate to escape. I was relieved to have completed work on the build, but there was still more ahead. While I'd been working on these assets, I'd been chipping away at the development and finance plan. Successful applicants would receive the grant in installments when certain development milestones were reached. Screen Australia required us to specify 3 milestones in the schedule. The first milestone marking the close of contracting, the second milestone marking an appropriate middle point during development, and the third milestone marking the end of development. The goal of the game's expansion pack fund was to bring games to release, meaning we had to plan and budget for the game's entire alpha, beta, and marketing phase. As an indie, it feels difficult to provide confident estimates knowing that even AAA studios fail to meet their deadlines. I must have rewritten the development plan about 5 times, and I began to worry that my full vision for Project Feline would take too long and cost too much to be considered a viable candidate. To reduce risk, I decided to split Project Feline into 3 episodes for the submission, and pitch the first episode for the current funding round. This fit much better with Screen Australia's criteria, and I felt I would have a much easier time staying on schedule and on budget with a short episode rather than the full game. I checked with them, they didn't mind this approach so long as the episode was brought to market. The finance plan was one of the more challenging deliverables to complete. I'm pretty new to the business side of game development, but luckily, my dad has some business experience, and together we combined forces to tackle the finance plan. We conducted some research on budgeting for games similar in scope to Project Feline and filled out the template spreadsheet provided by Screen Australia. I had a lot of concerns on whether or not we'd even make the deadline, but with my dad's business experience and Matt's level design chops, I felt confident we would make the submission on time. The marketing plan had to be 3 pages minimum, despite the fact that we could only spend 10% of the grant on marketing. There's a lot of tension when trying to make a living from something you're personally invested in, and it's for this reason I think a lot of devs avoid thinking about marketing. It really is a whole other art form in itself, and takes years of practice. It's at times like this I feel very grateful for the community interested in my game and my devlogs, because thanks to them I've had a lot of opportunities to practice marketing. For each video I've published, each tweet I've made, and each screenshot posted to Reddit has been an opportunity to experiment with visual branding, copywriting, and driving engagement, which is ultimately what marketing is all about. Having this community to engage with over the years has given me a lot of ideas on how I would market my game for release. Within a couple of hours, I was able to write up a 7-page marketing plan for the submission. Last but not least, we had to submit a pitch video of no more than 3 minutes long.
So yeah, I've got like that first 40 seconds of just like, you know, gameplay, artwork, anything I can to communicate like the vision of it. And then, you know, this footage of me talking for a bit about like what we're gonna do. There's a lot of missing blank areas in this video that I'm gonna need to fill with B-roll. That video comes in at like just under the 3-minute mark. I had to go like full super like hyper editing mode. I had to cut out like every other breath. I thought it was gonna be quite difficult because, you know, that's like the first thing they're probably gonna look at, right? But it was actually a lot easier, mostly because I keep forgetting about this. My second job is making videos, is making devlogs, and I've been doing that for the last 3 years. It's a lot similar to just making a devlog. So I'm gonna work more on this, get some more B-roll, get this video together, and then we should be ready to submit. Today's the day, submission day. I've put together a build which has a few concessions in it. First of which being a loading screen, which we have loading screens now, so that's pretty cool. I've implemented these on every level, and they'll have like a tip on them with the controls. Because I'm trying to think like, whoever plays this, they need to like know what to do at all times, so I've tried to make it like as obvious as possible. I also added a little something for when you finish the build, so once you complete this level, unlock the gate. Because we did have another section all through here, but we don't have that fully meshed out. It just fades to white, and if you walk into it, it'll come up with a little mission complete screen and play some music saying, "Congratulations, you won."
We spent the rest of the day importing our submission materials and uploading the build to Google Drive. We reviewed every single response to every question on the submission form and hit submit.
Well, we did it. We submitted. We got an automated response saying that our submission was received, and now we just wait.
It's a strange feeling to submit a grant application, as you put in all this work, hit submit, and then nothing for several months. It feels a bit anticlimactic, but on the other hand, it felt as though a huge weight had been lifted off my shoulders. I was no longer in control, and this was all in Screen Australia's hands now. After 2 long months, I got an email from Screen Australia notifying us that Project Feline had been approved. We were also told that approval is subject to full terms and conditions, which will be set out in a long-form agreement with Screen Australia and which needs to be executed within 3 months of this email. Great! So, where do we sign? They didn't attach the agreement to this email. In fact, we had to wait quite a bit to receive it. While we were waiting for them to send it, they wanted to set up a call with us to kick things off. We asked to delay this call until after we had been sent the agreement. We were then asked for trailer footage for an upcoming sizzle reel, and we were asked to confirm our details for their upcoming press release to announce the funded games, except our project hadn't been funded yet, and we hadn't seen or signed any agreement. All of this publicity seemed premature, and this is where I felt red flags began to show. We had to wait 12 more days to be sent a draft of the Project Grant Agreement, or PGA. I was instructed to carefully read the PGA, seek legal advice, and complete details were highlighted, using the track changes tool in Word to edit the document. So I downloaded the attachment, opened it in Word, and oh boy. My eyes were privy to numerous mistakes and errors, like stray numbers printed on the page, defined terms referred to in lowercase, unnumbered or missing clauses, and references to clauses that didn't exist.
This is acceptable to you?
I was appalled. And this is not the standard I expect of a legal document. If they couldn't even number their clauses correctly, what else would I be in for once we signed on? But this was a draft, and perhaps they plan to rectify these issues later. Still, the fact that this was sent to me and presumably the 30 other applicants by a government agency raised more red flags for me. But was I being too pedantic? Were my standards set too high? Or are my concerns perfectly reasonable? I needed a second opinion on this, and my dad has written and signed way more contracts than I have, so I asked him to take a look at it and tell me if he thought there was anything off. I was really hoping for him to say that I was overreacting and that all of this was fine, but instead, he found more issues with the PGA. We spent the next 4 days going through the PGA line by line, finding issues on nearly every page. The PGA is comprised of 2 sections. The project grant details, which contains the project-specific information like the grant amount, the start and end date, and our contact details. The other section is the project grant general terms, which specify the terms and conditions of the agreement. It would take too long to go through all the issues we found here, so instead we'll be focusing mainly on Clause 6 of the general terms. 6.1 stipulates that you represent, warrant, and agree that A, you will hold all intellectual property rights, including copyright, clearances, releases, and consents necessary to produce, complete, deliver, and exploit the project without infringing on any intellectual property or other rights or interests, for example in connection with any script, music, sound recording, and moral rights, and without contravening applicable law, for example in relation to actionable defamation, privacy, and trademarks. B, the project will be original, and C, you will own all copyright in the project. But I don't own all the copyright in the project. Remember those marketplace assets we used for the V-Slice? I don't own the copyright to those, or the Unreal Engine itself, but I do have a license to use them, which is common industry practice. So would using Unreal or stock assets violate this clause? 6.8 stipulates that you will not assign your intellectual property rights, including copyright, in the project without first obtaining Screen Australia's written consent. This is a big problem, because this clause essentially gives Screen Australia ultimate veto over any decision I make in relation to Project Feline's intellectual property. This doesn't just cover selling my IP or copyright to a third party, but licensing it too. I might decide in future to sell my IP to a publisher or incorporate my own company and transfer my IP to that company. And intellectual property doesn't just cover the game. That's devlogs, merch, sequels, spin-offs, and fan art. That's right, if you wanted to keep making fan art of Gabi, I would need to get Screen Australia's written approval first to let you. Not only that, but this clause survives termination or expiry of the agreement. This means Screen Australia retains this power
forever.
So if we were to sign this, but decide to leave after 1 week for whatever reason and repay Screen Australia the grant, they would still retain this power even if Project Feline was entirely funded somewhere else. So 2 years from now, 5 years from now, 20 years from now, if I wanted to transfer, license, or otherwise assign my own intellectual property, I would still need Screen Australia's written approval. Them saying no isn't even the worst case scenario, as I could write them requesting approval, and they are contractually within their right not to make a decision at all, and I would have no recourse. In their email, they also said, under our terms of trade, Screen Australia will not enter into negotiations with grant recipients in respect of the core conditions of the PGA other than in exceptional circumstances. Screen Australia's terms of trade define the conditions by which they conduct business. For example, if we were found to have been lying on our application, then Screen Australia would consider that a violation of their terms of trade and possibly withdraw their funding. So, what are these core conditions? I don't know. The words core conditions are capitalized in their terms of trade, but are never explicitly defined. In fact, this is the only place in the entire document they appear, and they don't appear at all in the PGA itself. We sent an email with a marked up version of the PGA and some questions about Clause 6. While we were waiting for their response, we reluctantly took them up on that kickoff call. Now, I prefer doing things in writing, as I prefer having a written record of all of my correspondence in case anything goes wrong. But I was hoping they would be able to answer some of my questions about Clause 6 and these core conditions they mentioned earlier. They couldn't answer most of our questions concerning Clause 6, but told me that the core conditions referred to the funding amount. They also assured me that Clause 6.8 was not intended to stop Project Feline getting published. But remember, this clause gives them ultimate say over any IP assignment forever, which includes transferring or licensing Project Feline to a publisher. We were also told to talk to a lawyer and let Screen Australia know if any of these clauses would be problematic. We eventually got a response to our marked up PGA, which began with, "Please note under our terms of trade, Screen Australia will not enter into negotiations with grant recipients in respect of the general terms of the PGA." But wait a minute, that isn't what the terms of trade say. The words general terms don't appear anywhere in the terms of trade. The terms of trade say the core conditions were non-negotiable, which is what they initially said in their first email. In the call, I was told this meant the funding amount. But after I raised questions about the general terms, which I thought I was encouraged to do, they then said the general terms were non-negotiable. If you're confused, so were we, and it would appear there was some confusion at Screen Australia too, on what was negotiable and what wasn't. We took their advice and ran this by a lawyer, who didn't seem overly impressed with the agreement and urged us not to sign it in its present form. So I wonder, if they weren't prepared to negotiate the general terms, why did they encourage us to take this to a lawyer? Why did they send us a Word document and not a PDF? And why did they ask us to use the track changes tool? Despite this, they changed the general terms anyway and provided a second draft of the PGA. In this version, they altered clause 6.1b to read, "You own or will own the copyright in all original works and subject matter other than works created for the project according to the Copyright Act 1968. And they removed 6.1c altogether. But wait, how can we warrant that we will own the copyright if, with their approval, we can transfer it to a third party? If we were to transfer copyright to a third party, then we will no longer own the copyright in all original works, thus violating clause 6.1b. Was this contradiction intentional? Most of our other suggestions were rejected. For example, that missing clause 11.9 was actually supposed to say 12.9. This clause lists out all of the defined terms in the agreement, one of which reads, "Contributor means any person specified in the finance plan as providing funds for the project." We suggested they change this definition to "contributor means any entity specified in the finance plan." We thought it was necessary to change this as we had already received funding from Epic Games, which is not a person, but a corporate entity. And in any normal business context, entity includes both persons and incorporated bodies. I thought it was weird that they referred to persons specifically and appeared to exclude corporate entities from this clause. Their response? Not accepted. Person in this context can also mean a corporate entity or organization. Alright, well, if person is supposed to mean a corporate entity in this context, then should this not have been said in the document? The rest of their comments read mostly like this one, refusing to accept most of our changes, with clause 6.8 remaining as is, giving Screen Australia ultimate veto over any publishing deal for the rest of time. Now, they insisted on this clause because they wanted a say in who I decide to publish with. For example, if a recipient were to open talks with a publisher that Screen Australia would deem unfavorable, like an adult games publisher, then Screen Australia would take issue with that and would want a say on that decision. Now, I'm more than happy to give them a say, but contractually, they don't get a say, they get the say. And not just in publishing deals, but in any assignment of my IP and copyright. And they have this control indefinitely. I have no immediate plans to sign with the publisher, and I didn't expect to have to think about this for a while. I thought this was a development grant, and this is not what I expect of a grantor-grantee relationship. And I feel like Screen Australia are acting more like a partner here and not a granting body. Epic administer grants all over the world, and my mega grant allowed me full control over any IP decisions. I would expect to negotiate this sort of thing with a publisher who would undertake the responsibility of marketing, distribution, porting, localization, and more. Screen Australia are not doing any of these things, and to demand ultimate veto over my IP in perpetuity seems like a bit much. At this point, I was ready to walk away and seek funding elsewhere. I emailed them saying if they weren't willing to change clause 6.8 to something more suitable or remove it altogether, then I would withdraw my application. I sent them this and awaited their response. We've been on this for 7 weeks now. As someone who is new to the business side of game development, this was a lot to deal with. There was so much information to sort through, and I was glad it was all in writing so I could keep track of it in case something went wrong. This is why I would never do something like this over the phone. But as soon as they realized I was ready to pull out, they tried cold calling my number. I didn't answer, but received a text saying,
"Oh, hi Raymond, this is Lee from Screen Australia. I'm the head of online here and look after the games extension back funding. I just wanted to have a chat with you about these emails going around."
have a chat? I wasn't interested in having a chat, because the last time that happened, they gave us conflicting information about the core conditions, and we only came out more confused. I wanted everything in writing. The next day, he did write me, saying,
"Are you please able to give me a call when you have a moment, please?"
Why did he insist that I call him? In the time he took to write this email, he could have just actually told me what he wanted. I still hadn't received an official response from them yet, and I had no idea what Lee wanted to chat about. But I wanted to make sure that all our dealings were in writing, so I made this known to him, and he wrote back, saying,
"I was hoping to discuss the overall intentions of Screen Australia and provide more context to some of your concerns."
Are we seriously expected to accept verbal assurances and context to address the terms of a legally binding contract over the phone?
As well as propose a potential solution for Clause 6.8 by adding wording to the effect of that our approval will not be unreasonably withheld.
Now, I understand Screen Australia is concerned about their public image, and I was actually prepared to accept Clause 6.8 and give them final say on my IP, but only for the term of the agreement, and I let them know this. We finally received a response from a Screen Australia lawyer. They told us that they don't ordinarily negotiate the terms due to the high volume of grants they administer, and have always adopted standard terms for consistency and fairness. They then proceeded to negotiate these terms anyway, and look, I understand that having standard terms would be way less burdensome for them, but this doesn't work in practice if those terms have this many issues. They attached a proposed final revision to the agreement, with 6.8 still surviving indefinitely, and with a statement that they were not prepared to negotiate further. Regarding Clause 6.8, Screen Australia are now saying, "We do encourage successful applicants to retain their ownership of their IP in publisher deals moving forwards. As such, we require sign-off on projects that wish to assign their IP to a third party. This is to help ensure projects are being fairly valued when engaging in such deals. On the one hand, they encourage me to retain my IP ownership, but require I retain this ownership unless they approve otherwise. I repeat, this isn't an encouragement, but a requirement, and this requirement survives indefinitely. I thought the meaning of this clause was to protect their reputation from being associated with undesirable publishers, but it seems the goalposts have moved. Nowhere in their terms of trade or the PGA does it state that Screen Australia intend to advise me on the value of my IP in publisher deals on an ongoing basis. Now at this point, we hadn't even signed the agreement yet. And if we had this many problems now, I dreaded how many more there would be through actual development, release, and beyond. So after much consideration, I decided to withdraw from the grant. I received an acknowledgement of my withdrawal and a notice that stated, "We remind you that all dealings with Screen Australia are and remain commercial in confidence."
Is that so?
Nowhere in our previous correspondence did they say anything was commercial in confidence. Their terms of trade make no mention of the word confidential, and we haven't signed any grant or non-disclosure agreement. So as far as I'm concerned,
It's free real estate.
now, it was their suggestion that we sought legal advice on the PGA before signing it, and we did, and this cost us $1,500. So we asked to be reimbursed. They refused, and we argued it seemed unfair that those who did sign could use the grant money to recoup their legal expenses, while those who didn't would be out of pocket. They eventually offered us $1,500 as settlement, so long as, among other things, we agreed not to publicly disparage them. Why did they want a non-disparagement clause if there was nothing wrong with the agreement? We feel no need for any such clause on our side, as we feel we haven't done anything wrong. We just wanted to recoup our legal costs and to be reimbursed, but now they're talking about a cash settlement. So we asked for a higher settlement amount. My experience so far has been quite negative, and I told them I was already working on this devlog to document my honest experience with the grant application process. But it seems to me that they were concerned about what I was going to say and warned me that Screen Australia will be monitoring closely for misleading and deceptive representations made to the public. I felt rather intimidated by this. Misleading and deceptive representations. What were they implying here? After withdrawing from Screen Australia's grant, I sent my submission off to Epic Games instead, as I had originally planned to at the start of the year. My dad, however, dissatisfied with how we had been treated by Screen Australia, wrote a formal complaint to the CEO, Graham Mason. His response? There was a misunderstanding on your part with regard to the intended meaning of certain terms and the overall interpretation of the contract. Okay, so if their agreement is so prone to misinterpretation, should they have not used our suggestions to make the agreement less ambiguous? Contrary to your assertions, the grant agreement does not provide Screen Australia with de facto ownership of the games it supports in perpetuity. Rather, there's clauses designed to ensure the agency is provided with an opportunity to consider the implications of any proposed transfer of the IP ownership in projects it is financially supported. But this is more than an opportunity to consider. This agreement gives them absolute veto over my ability to assign my IP in perpetuity. It is sometimes the case that inexperienced developers or producers may not understand the implications of assigning IP rights to third parties. And I agree, I'm way inexperienced when it comes to these things, but I wasn't going to let Screen Australia take advantage of that and make those decisions for me. I feel I would never learn anything if that were to happen. Screen Australia are concerned about the implications of me assigning my IP. But I feel that the implications of assigning my right to assign my IP are way more concerning. Screen Australia provides more than $80 million in production funding to the screen industry each year. It includes similar terms across all PGAs. And this is the agreement they use across all their projects?
This how you do business?
Over its long history, the agency has never taken de facto ownership of an applicant's IP. And that may very well be true, but the agreement gives them absolute veto over my ability to assign my IP in perpetuity. This was the last correspondence we received. And so far, it's been quite the saga. This devlog documents my honest experience with the Screen Australia grants process. They may very well have been acting in good faith here, but a contract is a contract. No amount of chatting, assurances, context could distract me from the number of issues found on this legally binding long-form agreement. This unfolded over many months, and there are likely many sides to this story. But this is how I see it. They sent us a contract with errors, rejected most of our concerns when we pointed them out, insisted that we misinterpreted the agreement and that there was nothing wrong with it, called my number to provide verbal assurances and context, didn't have us sign an NDA, but told us our dealings were confidential anyway, offered us a cash settlement with a non-disparagement clause, and when we wouldn't sign it, told us that our public communications would be closely monitored. What kind of impression does this leave? It was really tempting to take this grant. It would have been immensely helpful to get Project Feline produced, and it was quite a lot of money, way more money than I'd ever seen. But I was not prepared to lower my standards and compromise my principles to accept this grant. While in the short term things will be much more difficult without immediate funding, in the long term, Project Feline is better off. So that concludes the Screen Australia saga so far. Thank you for listening to my story. In fact, I have a lot to thank you guys for. If no one was interested in Project Feline, I don't think Screen Australia would have even considered funding the game. But what do you think? Was I being too strict, or was I right to decline the funding? And for any fellow developers out there, is negotiating a contract normally this complicated? Has this ever happened to a game you've worked on? I would love to hear your stories and thoughts in the comments below. Ultimately, I don't know where things will go next. It's going to be pretty difficult without any immediate funding, but I'm going to do my best. That whole thing I mentioned about splitting the game up into episodes, I've had to radically change my strategy since withdrawing from this grant. I do have something else in mind, but that's all I can say for now. But in the meantime, if you would like to support Feline, wishlisted on Steam, and check out the new merch drop available for a limited time. This episode was one of the most complicated ones to make, and I spent almost a whole year getting footage and editing it together. If you would like to support me while I make these videos, consider becoming a channel member or Patreon. Now, this wasn't even the full story of what happened this year. There was a 2-month gap between when we sent our submission and when we started negotiating, and a lot happened in that time, but that's a story for the next episode. Oh, one more thing. Those stray numbers I found printed across the agreement wouldn't always show up. If I opened the document on one computer, they would, and if I opened it on another computer, they wouldn't. It turns out this was because those numbers were marked as hidden text, and if I went into the Word settings and ticked Show Hidden Text, the document got bigger. Yep, Screen Australia had hidden text on a legal contract.